Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I actually wanted to talk about the Revolt TV summit that happened not too long ago, and I just wanted to give my opinion on the whole entire video that I saw here on YouTube, and I also wanted to go into each panelist or almost each panelist and my thoughts on them. But I actually just wanted to say that overall I thought that I thought that a major part of that summit and of that video I saw, it was just an entire mess. And honestly, I really thought it could have also been handled better. I honestly thought they should have gotten some better, not only liberal, but conservative representation and liberal and conservative black, hell, or even independent black people to be on that panel, and not just mushmouths like T.I. or not just people trying to convert us to the other side like, Katrina and Candace. But I digress. But anyway, I'm going to be going down the list of people that I wrote down, people who I thought spoke out to me, or key points that I saw in what people were saying. So I'm going to start right now, and I've taken some notes, so bear with me. Now, the moderator of the show, I forgot his name, but the moderator of the show, I really thought that he was a better moderator than people were saying. Now, he was a better moderator up until T.I. started cutting off Candace Owens, and she couldn't get a word out because, to be honest, I actually wanted to know how she was going to defend herself and what she was going to say. Honestly, I don't necessarily trust what she says. I take what she says with a grain of salt. However, there are some certain key points that she made that I'm going to get to later on in this video. But I think the moderator was a pretty good moderator until that point. The moderator was right when he said, based on Killer Mike's talking points, that Black people, specifically ADOS Black people, I am not an ADOS Black person, but from what he said, specifically ADOS Black people, but Black people as a whole, we should not be acquiescing either party, and we should just be in the middle, which is why I consider myself moderate nowadays. Again, more socially liberal, but I consider myself moderate. I am pretty centrist on the whole party. But what the moderator is saying is maybe we should not be acquiescing either party, or at least impulsively acquiescing either party, and we should figure out a plan. Because what was mentioned is, what does, our agenda look like? We have to word that out and then bring it to whoever we think is going to be the right fit, especially in our local government. And I feel like we don't pay attention to that often. I'm going to get into that later on in this video as well. The moderator basically said that we need our own agenda. And I feel like a lot of times Black people have 10 million and one agendas, one, and two, we either don't know what our agenda is, okay? And now you can say, oh, there is a Black agenda. We know what the Black agenda is. But a lot of times we just don't know how to strategize getting it put forth to the front. And a lot of times we just think that making a bunch of noise on social media will get our voices heard. Now, I said this in my last video, in my 13 Reasons Why video, okay? When we start making noise, yes, some people will listen, but I feel like sometimes we make enough noise for just people to cancel us out. And this is one of the reasons they're starting to look at liberals and far leftist people and saying, you're just aggressive, and, you don't know how to, strategize, organize, and, people can't take us seriously. Now, there are people who couldn't take liberals seriously for the longest time, but the far left way of acting and thinking is just making that worse. But I'm just saying, a lot of us think by making noise, simply making noise and venting our frustrations out on social media, that is not how you get things done. And I feel like Black people, in a way, either will hear this information, but they won't process it and receive it. They'll agree with me on this, or some will agree with me on this and say, you're right, but then they'll go back to doing the same thing I just said is not working. Now, the number one agenda I really hear about coming from ADOS Black people is reparations. And although, look, as a non-ADOS Black person, because I made a video about reparations and there were people who disliked it more than they liked it. There were people who came at me in the comment sections and told me to shut up and sit down and I should not be talking about it because I gave critical points about, are we financially and economically savvy and literate and ready to handle these checks that are given to us? And also, how is that going to be distributed? How much do you think you're actually going to get per individual Black person? Like, think about that. But because I didn't say, oh, the government should just give us our checks already. Well, not my checks because I'm non-ADOS, but I'm just saying ADOS, ADOS, for those of you who may not understand. I'm a non-ADOS Black person, but I'm going to tell you this. Even if I wasn't, I still, like I said in that video multiple times, you are deserving and owed those checks and are entitled to those checks, okay? But what I'm saying is, are you really ready to handle those checks? Because I do not think, judging by, I think we're getting there and we are moving forward, but I don't think we're 100% there in financial and economic literacy and savviness to handle checks. I even said it's like winning the lottery. Like most people who win the lottery, they lose that within a short amount of time, or between like 3 to 7 years. So that's what I'm trying to say. It's one thing to get money you've been waiting years for. It's another thing to get it and to not be able to keep it. And someone even mentioned this. What about inflation? What about taxes? You know, when you get a big lump sum of money, like when you win the lottery, you pay a gift tax. Will you be paying gift taxes on those reparations? Hopefully not, but think about that. It's more than just the government cutting you a check that's been owed to you. You also have to think of the other possibilities. So this is just my little input on reparations. This is not me saying this as a non-ADOS Black person who, from what I am told, is never going to see those checks. Okay, fine. Since they belong to ADOS Black people, fine. But I'm just saying this. What is the point of you getting these checks and you're not being able to maintain and keep them? Do you have a plan? Again, how are they going to be distributed? That's all. Think about all of those things that I just told you, because you may have to think about them. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Tamika Mallory. I really feel like she dropped a bit of, gems and knowledge here and there. She's not wrong in some of the points that she makes. But, she kind of does what, not the Democrats, but she kind of does, what, we like to hear, use racism, white supremacy talking points, which is not wrong because what she says is absolutely right. But I just want to get into her for a little bit. Now, Tamika made a very good point about voting and how we need to stress the importance of voting towards younger people. And T.I. also made something, a great point about that too. So I'll get into him later. And the panel also said this too, but Tamika said that, we are past telling children that, and young people, that somebody died for you or somebody marched, fought, and died for you as the reason or as the importance of voting. They always say the reason you need to vote is because someone marched, fought, and died for you. And although I do think that that is important to know, because that's the one thing my parents told me. When I told my parents, I'm not going to vote because I don't trust anyone, their whole thing was somebody marched, fought, and died for your right to vote at one point where you had no say in voting and you had no say in who could be at the head of your rights or reinforce right or create what rights could benefit or harm you. So they are right about that. We need to let kids know that there at one point you didn't have the power. You as Black people, as women, you Black women specifically, you did not have the right or the choice or the opportunity to vote. But we kind of use that old way of talking as that's the main reason, and that's the reason why it's important to vote, because someone marched, fought, and died for you. What Tamika said was, we need to tell them more than just somebody marched, fought, and died for you, that's why you should vote. But you need to tell them that, okay, if you don't vote, certain opportunities may not be given to you, certain opportunities may be taken away from you, okay? And you need to explain to them why, okay? I feel like we're very vague on the voting thing and the importance of voting. She said that we need to tell kids and young people, especially because young people kind of influence, voting nowadays, or young people really influence the culture surrounding politics and a lot of other things, that, what is more important to you. We need to start telling kids or bringing, or listening to children that, and young people, what are their needs, or what do they find important, okay? What do they want out of voting, or out of their politicians, or whoever they favor? What do they want? we need to be telling them about the issues that are at the center of what they care about. And that was her words. And that is true. Nowadays, there are kids, young people who are looking at a whole bunch of other things that need to get fixed, or a whole bunch of other things that they care about. Like Tamika said, whether it be education, jobs, police brutality, that's what they are facing right now. Okay. When it came time for Black people to vote back then, or fight for the right to vote back then, they were talking about things that, were affecting them right now, and what they didn't want affecting the future generation after them. Now, she made something about how Black spaces are too elitist, and there is somewhat truth to that. And she basically said that that we should have people at the forefront of the conversation, like the scammers, the stripper, the drug dealer. Now, look, I believe these people have voices that should be heard, but I don't think that everyone should be at the forefront of the movement. I don't think we should be making the stripper or the scammer or the drug dealer the face or at the forefront of the movement. But I do think we should keep and heed the words of what they say, because they have to live in this society too. However, I believe the elitist thing, I believe it is somewhat true. However, I also think that there should be a level of elitist, and I put that in quotes because I do think there should be a clean-cut image when it comes to, Black spaces being well organized and, stuff, because other groups do it too, okay? Now, granted, it shouldn't be elitist in a very exclusive, divisive way, but it should be elitist in a very clean, classy, and organized way. That's where I believe that whole elitist thing should be, put in. And she made a good point when talking to Candace about how we can't come into rooms like panel rooms like Revolt Summit TV with lies that we already know that are lies, okay? So you can't come and convince us one thing, like the guy in the yellow sweater who didn't really bring much to the conversation. The guy with the yellow sweater wrapped around his neck, I forgot his name. He said that, yeah, we're not stupid. You can't come to us and tell us something that we already know about, or you can't come and lie to us when we already know it's a lie. You can't really fool us. Look, Black folks, especially ADOS Black folks, look, we are not dumb, okay? We can see through the BS, which is why a lot of people don't like Candace Owens. We can see through the BS, but I do think that sometimes we constantly do allow to get ourselves to get fooled sometimes, okay? Especially when all that glitters looks like gold to us. But we are not dumb to fall for 100% of everything. Tamika Mallory made this good point, because I actually saw her speak one time at the Jacob Javits Center for Circle of Sisters one time. Now, she made a very, 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 very good point that for the longest time, Black people, maybe we should just have our own party. But pros and cons, though. I think it's good that the Black people can have their own party. It's an independently Black party because, hey, no one is, fighting for us as a whole. And let's just be honest, even if other political parties have somewhat care for the Black community, they also have to serve other people, okay? And I do agree that it will be good, it will be a great thing to have a Black independent party that only serves Black people, but I question that. I really question how inclusive it is going to be. They talk about we need the Black this and a Black that, and I'm all here for it. Just like when we say we need to start our own businesses. But I personally feel like sometimes we say, let's start our own stuff, or let's start our own ish, out of a defense mechanism and a rebuttal and an impulsive spite towards other parties that we feel that hurt us. So when we see something from a brand or a business that does something racist, whether it's subtle or very overt, we are like, okay, this is why we have to support Black-owned businesses and start our own businesses. And although it's a great answer to that, and although it's a great solution to that, I also have to say, are you doing it because it's a necessity, or are you doing it because you want to start a business, like you have a passion for business, or are you doing it because you're trying to solve a problem that pretty much has existed for a long time, or are you doing this out of spite towards that business? You know what I'm saying? So I also have to say, with that, why are we starting our own party? I do believe it's important and it's necessary and it will be a great thing, but then again, how strong will it be? How inclusive will it be? Okay, are you just going to allow ADOS Black people to be the heads and the politicians and the faces of that movement, or can non-ADOS Black people come in? Because let's just be honest, I hear so many people telling me, well, not so many, but I hear a couple of ADOS Black folks when I criticize Black folks as a whole, especially ADOS Black folks when it comes to reparations, that I should shut up since I am not ADOS and I shouldn't speak on this situation. But if I had your back and if I just shut up and agreed, nodded and agreed, you would love me to have to be a supporter, okay? You would love me to be in support of your movement. And this, I said the same thing with dark-skinned Black women and the Black LGBTQ. You shun us, you shame us, you cast us to the side, you criticize us, you show you're anti-us in some way, shape, or form, but yet and still you want us to fight for you, fight by you, fight with you, and be the frontliners of, you know, the movement. And this is another thing I said, look, a Black party will be great, but what about strength in numbers? Will we ever be successful, or will we, you know, and I'm not saying we can do this with local government, but let's go to general politics. Will we be successful in general politics if it's solely just us being in that group? Okay, are we going to allow other people to speak up in this party? Is the Black LGBTQ and the dark-skinned Black women and Black women in general, are the more marginalized in the Black community going to have a voice in this Black party? Are they going, let's say for instance this party does get big, okay? Let's say for instance an all-Black party does get big, or, you know, does become on the same level of notoriety or popularity like the two-party system we have now. Are Black people going to fight for everyone and liberate everyone in the Black community, or is it just going to be the less marginalized, specifically the Black cisgender straight male? So this is the same thing Chrissy was talking about. We talk about having our own Black this and our own Black that and our own Black media, but are you going to, you know, be completely different from the racist white media you say exists and say always likes to put Black people down? Or are you going to perpetuate the same problems, the same ideologies, and the same actions they do, but this time it's just a Black face in front of it? So are you going to be perpetuating colorism and sexism and homo and transphobia? Are you going to show your xenophobia in some way? Because sometimes ADOS act like they don't have xenophobia, but they do, okay? Not all, but some of you do. So I have to call that out. So although I think a Black party is necessary and needed, I'm just saying, how is it going to work? You have to think about these strategies now. I think a lot of us, we say we need to start our own this and our own that straight off of impulse and emotion. And even if we're right about the necessity of it, how are we going to enact it? And let's just say this gets all the way into general politics. If a Black party were to win, let's say someone from a Black party or an all Black party were to win the general election, become president, that person, like Obama, has to be a president towards the entire country. I do think that a Black agenda should be put at the forefront, yes, but at the same time, you have to realize they have to also govern everybody else. But I have to say this, you have to be prepared for the possibilities. I feel like we have a level of tunnel vision based on our emotion, which is not wrong, but I also think that we miss some key points. You know, we forget that the rest of the world and the rest of the aspects of the world that we apply to kind of exist, if you get what I'm saying. Now, Katrina, I don't like this woman. I think she's just a caper for Trump. I think she's just enchanted by his money or something like that. I personally think that, you know, maybe this guy gave her a platform or a job or something, so now she feels eternally grateful and thinks he's the best thing that happened since sliced bread. Like, I don't really take what she says too seriously. Same with Candace Owens. I don't think she brought too many sustainable or accountable facts, or I don't think she really brought any facts that really could stick or make sense. She talked about criminal justice reform, which I believe is very necessary, especially when it comes towards Black and brown folks. So I do think criminal justice reform, especially, you know, under any president actually, is just necessary, okay? Especially as it pertains to people of marginalized groups, specifically Black and brown people, okay? However, she's mentioning things like ASAP Rocky, and oh, you want your basketball team back from China. Oh, Trump did it. Trump was the president at that time, okay? And I feel like Trump is doing this, and I think T.I. mentioned this, he's only doing this to save face, and he's an opportunist. And I kind of do agree with that, because for the longest time, people are telling him that he's not diplomatic enough, he doesn't care enough, he's very nonchalant when it comes to his presidency. And look, maybe there's something we really don't know, but I do not trust this guy. I do not think that he has the interests of the people. He's only interested in himself. And you could say, go back to his tweets, and he was just taken out of context. But I personally don't see it as him being taken out of context. I really do believe that this man just simply does not care, and he basically wants this title, and he's only being diplomatic because he has to be, and he's being forced to be. Look, I believe Candace Owens and Katrina, I think they are mostly just lobbyists for Trump, and, you know, they'll say anything to make him sound good. Now, granted, playing devil's advocate, we kind of did the same thing with Obama for 48 years until we felt like nothing got done for us, okay? We felt like, you know, he was the quote-unquote God. Well, didn't think he was a god, but I definitely think that he was probably one of the better, if not the best presidents. And that's just not me caping for him because he looks like me, or he's Black, no, or half Black because he's biracial. But I am just saying that he did not do a lot of damage to this country, and he actually has truly been diplomatic as he can. And let's just be honest, we had a lot of things like Congress getting in his way. You can't deny that. I always say, look how hard he had to fight for healthcare. I'm analyzing that situation. I'm not just looking at MSNBC and CNN and Fox, which they all have their own agenda, but at the same time, I'm also analyzing from what I've seen around me. Okay, so let's just be honest. People are going to cape for who they believe in, and maybe they do believe in Trump. I can't understand why, but so we did the same thing with Obama or with any president or politician that we wanted to believe so hard in. So we will come up with any excuse, whether actual or factual or false, to say that this person is a great person. So even though I don't agree with Katrina, and I think she's coming in with lies, and I think she's coming in with half-assed truths and, you know, opportunist pandering, like he called up ASAP Rocky to try to get him back. Let's be honest, Black people didn't even want him back in. From what I saw on the internet, Black people did not want ASAP Rocky back. They said, oh no, you can rot over there. You got your wake-up call because you said you weren't part of like Black Lives Matter and you didn't care. But that's what she's trying to use as Trump being a good guy and he's not racist because he's trying to get criminal justice reform. Now, the thing about criminal justice reform, they've been trying to get something like that put in for years before Trump, and it has been for a long time on a local political level. So this is how you know that your local politics can be just as effective, if not more effective, than your federal politics. But I personally don't think Trump is a good candidate for anyone, specifically Black people. I don't think Trump is good at all. Now, I actually want to get into T.I. Now, look, I'm not the biggest fan of T.I. I can appreciate T.I. calling out the issues of racism and white supremacy. I can appreciate T.I. giving back to the community. I can appreciate T.I. talking about issues and, you know, being socially involved to a certain extent. But I do think T.I. kind of is inarticulate, and I also do believe that he's very much a mushmouth who kind of doesn't practice what he preaches. I feel like he listens to a lot of internet so-called internet pro-Black conscious community people and leaders on the internet, and he takes what their word is as gospel. And look, he may hear what they say and then see a correlation with what they say in the real world, as I once did at one point, and say that, yes, you're right. I do think T.I. is right in some of the talking points he made, and he did make great points. See, what I have to say here is that a lot of people are focused on that one clip of him cutting Candace Owens off and going back and forth and, you know, attacking her, and she can't get a word out, and about the crowd booing her and Katrina and stuff like that. And they're taking this as this was the whole Revolt TV summit. And honestly, this is that part of that summit that made this thing look like a mess. Okay, you know what I'm saying? And like I said, she also made some good factual points. Even T.I. said it. T.I. said, hey, what you said is very factual. He even agreed with her in some points. He can actually say that, you're right here, here, and there. But I also do think that he comes off like a mush mouth, just say what Black people want to hear and use the buzzwords like racism, white supremacy, even though it's true. Now, here are the points that T.I. made that I actually agreed with, okay? Now, T.I. made some great points about voting, that we wait too late to motivate young people to vote or educate young people about voting. We wait until their 18th birthday to tell them about voting. Now, I was pretty fortunate enough to learn in civics class in high school and global history in high school, where about voting, about how to vote, about local politicians, about where to go to vote, parties and whatnot. A little bit of the ins and outs of voting, but I believe most times we kind of vaguely touch around the subject, especially in when it comes to disenfranchised, marginalized, and lower income areas and groups, where a lot of times voting can be very impactful. Hell, nowadays you have people discouraging Black people from voting. I remember after Obama, or during Obama's second term, I heard people like Boyce Watkins practically discouraging us from voting by saying your vote doesn't matter, or at least to the Democrats, it doesn't matter. They always want your votes. They always want you to vote. And, voting doesn't mean anything anymore. And I see a lot of discouraging from voting. But T.I. was right. We do wait too late to tell young kids to vote or young people to vote. We do say, okay, wait 4 years to vote, because like I said, we put a lot more emphasis on general politics than we do on local politics. But I think other groups will far more focus, well, not far more, but they will focus a lot on local politics, whether more or just as much as general, okay? And this is when I think why certain other groups can win, you know what I'm saying? He basically says that the knowledge of voting and how to vote needs to be an overdeveloped mindset over time. It needs to be a developed mindset over time. And that is true. When I turned 18, people said, oh, you can vote. That was the number one thing I was told. You can vote. Now, T.I. said that what he wants to do is to create a self-sustaining, financially stable ecosystem for his people, revitalize his community. And I think this is why I respect T.I. outside of rap music. And this is why I respect Killer Mike outside of music and LeBron James outside of basketball. I respect athletes and rappers and celebrities who also do things outside of their community. And maybe because, I'm not the biggest rap fanatic, or I am not the biggest athletics fanatic or sports fanatic, you know what I'm saying? So I can't really relate 100% when it comes to them doing rap or sports and music or something like that. I mostly look at what they do outside of their field of music or rap music or sport. I appreciate what they can do outside of the community after they, made it, or while they're making it, Now, T.I. basically says that he wants to put in opportunity zones, and he said we can't do that without the proper people in office. And I believe that is true and false, where I do believe that it is possible for us to be independent and be self-sustaining and work, on ourselves and by ourselves. But I do think it's true, because you should be wary that you could have people putting in policies that can make certain things hard or damn near impossible for you. So he was right. It is important to have policies. It is important to have politicians that can put forth policies that work in your favor. Other groups do it all the time. I don't know why people kind of shame us or make us feel wrong for when we do it, or we just simply, don't do that. Or we, like I said again, focus too much on the general politics. Like T.I. said, yeah, the Republicans have not done that. For the most part, they put in policies that will benefit you if you have money. And that's where the whole tax breaks for the rich come in. And T.I. said, look, he benefits off those tax breaks, especially he acknowledges that he is rich and benefits off those tax breaks. Okay, so he's not complaining there. However, he says he can at least care about the community, or, you know, acknowledge that a majority of Black people in this country are not where he is financially, or do not always benefit from the Republican tax breaks. And of course, Candace Owens says, oh, Black people have jobs, they have jobs. And I do say, Black people, look deep in the policies that when you have jobs or are working to, when you have jobs, about what benefits you can get. Believe it or not, maybe there are just a bunch of loopholes we don't see. But I will say this, T.I. is right. He can acknowledge that he is a rich person and he can benefit off those tax breaks from Republican policies, but not a majority of Black people can. And that's what he's trying to point out. And look, there are Black people in comment sections saying that, oh, T.I. can't relate to us, or he can't relate to us anymore because he basically is a rich person, and not the average Black person is a rich person or a wealthy person or a well-to-do person. We're either like middle class, lower middle class, working poor, and then poor. Okay, we're that. Okay, we're right there. But of course, Candace Owens actually is more privileged than T.I., and I will get to that later. Candace Owens can't relate to Black people, especially on a financial level. She is not the average Black person either, and she never was. So I will get into that later. Now, T.I. did mention something about gentrification, which I have pros and cons about gentrification, and he's right that there are people who come and, you know, quote unquote, revitalize the community or revitalize neighborhoods that they've never been to, that they never lived in, that, you know, they just buy up these properties left and right, some of which are pushing people out of their homes because, you know, now gentrification is coming to where I'm living, and I heard it's coming to the South Bronx. I heard it's already in Brooklyn and Harlem. Now, I have no problem with gentrification in terms of revitalizing and making the place look nice, because at one point in the late 90s, early 2000s, 125th Street was toe up, okay? It was tore up, tore down all around. It was not the best looking of places, okay? And I'm not doing this to shade Harlem, but I'm just saying. I went to 125th once before, like, in maybe 2012 or 2013, and I'm telling you, it looked like you just saw it looked destitute. It's like, man, what went on? But with gentrification, in terms of revitalizing the place, there are better looking buildings, there are better looking storefronts, there are better looking, you know, the place just looks nice. It kind of like looks like you want to live here a little bit more, a little bit, not all the way there, but it looks like you want to live here. Okay. The only issue I have, you have outside people moving in who don't understand or respect the culture that was there. You have people, you know, changing up the atmosphere, and of course change is inevitable, unfortunately, but you have people disrespecting the people who are there. You have people who come in here making rent sky high, forcing people out of their homes because where are they supposed to go? And you see that happening now, and cost of living is getting higher and higher and higher, as if it wasn't high enough already in New York City. So that is the issue I also have with gentrification. But of course, I'm only speaking about New York City, and I know gentrification is affecting all other places like DC and, you know, Atlanta and whatnot. But I do think that gentrification offers great revitalization to the community that at one point was tore down and quote unquote crime ridden. And that's one thing you notice with revitalization. I guarantee you don't see crime or crime-ridden areas in a gentrified area or in a nice-looking. You don't see that. I remember how Cross County and a co-op city used to look when I was a child, and now the place is so revitalized and it's more clean, pristine, and everything like that. It makes you look like a neighborhood you can live in, like a really well-functioning neighborhood. And we, as Black folks, we deserve that. We deserve nice-looking, well-functioning, upright, well-to-do neighborhoods. We deserve it. But the thing is, I think we should get in. I feel like if we had known about this, or we had prepared for the future like this, we could easily get in. Now, I had to agree with T.I. when he asked the two women, Candace and Katrina, why or how can you align with a politician or with a person who basically puts in policies, enforces policies, or pretty much doesn't put in policies that can benefit you, or he puts in policies or agrees with policies that can harm you? How can you align with someone who's, you know, kind of who uses rhetoric of racism, white supremacy? Basically says, how can these women align with a politician who does not denounce racism, white supremacy? And of course, they're going to go and say he was taken out of context at Charlottesville and everything like that by saying there were good guys on both sides. He probably just does not know how to articulate himself well. They said, oh, they cut him off, and, you know, they do this to me all the time. They take one little snippet out of what I said and make that the whole thing. And look, I agree that people and the media have their own agenda, and people like to set people up, especially if they don't like you. But at the same time, I'll listen to certain things that Candace said. Candace is also known for deleting tweets and stuff, especially when she gets caught in some lies. So I'm going to take what she says with a grain of salt. So even if she says, oh, they do this to me, I think that's playing victim, honestly, on her part, because I just don't think she can be trusted. So I'm not willing to take her word by her trying to explain Trump away. I'm not doing it. I do agree, although Killer Mike said don't always look at the messenger, look at the message. And her message was actual and factual in some cases, but I feel like the messenger does matter sometimes. I really do think so. Because would you rather take something that a white supremacist says, even though it's true, when they don't have your best interest at heart? So I can't really trust it. So I'm sorry. Even if they have some truth and validity in it, I'm least likely to take it from that person versus the person who most likely will say the same thing but have my best interest at heart. I'm sorry. Cutting her off, T.I. cutting Candace Owens off was very disrespectful, and honestly, we wanted to hear what she had to say, or at least I did. I would want to hear what she was going to say, even if it was some BS, and she kind of did start with some BS, but you never let her finish, so how would we know what it was? So I felt like it was very tacky, and that is the one clip that got everyone talking. That is the one thing that had people saying that this is just a mess of a summit. This is why you don't get mushmouth celebrities to just speak on your behalf, and that's what we do, Black people. ADOS Black people specifically, they call on celebrities to talk about their issues. They call on celebrities to speak about their issues. And, you know, we always think whether we like what they say or don't like what they say is the end all be all. And I feel like, and this one person said it too, the LGBTQ community call GLAAD. Feminists call probably like bulletins and the Refinery 29s of the world. We just call on celebrities because we feel like they have all the powers in the world. They're not God. Same thing with Black politicians and politicians in general and the president. They're not God. They can't solve all our problems with a snap of a finger or with one word. I mean, they have enough, platform. They have enough of a platform to voice their opinion and to make a change. Yes. But at the same time, we have to stop putting all the burden of the Black community on one person's shoulders. And I think we do that too much. T.I. was right to say that there was not too much of a good time in terms of the overall culture of how America has treated Black people. However, I will say that there are quote unquote, certain aspects in which the Black community was doing better than they are now overwhelmingly. I will say that because we had things like Black Wall Street. We had things like, two-parent households for the most part. So that pretty much, was something that the Black community can take note from and say, you know what, this was a better time for us. But the culture of America itself was never great for Black people. It never really had Black people in mind 100% unless they saw it as a benefit. So let's just be honest, 13th Amendment that said, okay, you're free, you're not a slave unless you are arrested. So why do you think there's a mass incarceration for and that whole free labor thing that happens in prisons? See that? T.I. said Black people have been moving forward for the longest time. I think we have been moving forward, but I feel like the process is so slow that we feel as if we're not we're very much treading lightly. Black people, I realize, want overnight results. And I do think because it's been 400 years for ADO's black votes, at least, it has been 400 years for you guys, that you guys want a result like right now. And I find it funny because these are the same people that would say it's not going to happen overnight, but you got mad at Obama because after 8 years of being in office, you didn't get something that you wanted. But did you even put something into play? What were you doing those 4 years? You were just probably sitting back waiting on him to solve all your problems when your local politics could have done something. Now, I actually want to talk about Candace Owens, and the reason I didn't leave her for the last one is because I have, in my opinion, the best for last, for someone else. So the moderator basically asks her, what is the black agenda, or what agenda do, you have, or your side or your party has for black people? And she basically says that we need to identify what our agenda is, which I have mentioned earlier in this video. Yes, that is true. We need to identify what our agenda is, because I feel like we have a plethora of so-called agendas, but the main thing I hear from ADO's black people is reparations. But what I find funny is she wants to talk about the black agenda, but eventually she just goes straight into illegal immigration. That's one thing I noticed. And although she mentioned and makes good points, she goes straight into illegal immigration as being the sole cause and the sole problem. Look, I have family that are immigrants, legal immigrants. I have, parents who are immigrants, and I kind of can relate to the subject of immigration. So when I hear an attack on it, maybe you can say this is where I have a quote unquote soft spot. Now, granted, I am all for secure borders. I do think that, we should secure our borders. However, I think for people who do want to come over here and who do want a better life and who do legally want to come here and work hard and respect the country and stuff like that, while also respecting theirs and keeping, their culture and language and whatnot, I believe that people who do want to come here the right way and the legal way, I think that the immigration process needs to be more comprehensible, because I've been told by my mother and my parents, like, the whole getting the process done or navigating through this culture and this, this area, it's not easy. And they don't have really anyone to guide them and, help them out. I mean, maybe certain things are changing now, but when my parents' time came, they didn't necessarily have people to guide them and, direct them and help them navigate, especially my mother, who lost her mother pretty young. So she didn't have anyone really. So they had to pretty much do it all themselves. Now, I will have to say this. I don't believe that illegals should come over here all willy-nilly and we should have open, unsecure borders. No. But I want to know this. When we always touch on the subject of illegal immigration, it seems like the face of illegal immigration, or just immigration itself, is Latinos and, Hispanics, specifically Mexicans, okay? But what about all the other immigrants? The immigrants, like Killer Mike pointed out, before you want to say F them all, you have to realize that there are immigrants that look like you and me, Candace. And also, are they keeping the border secure from European immigrants, white European immigrants? And you will always hear this from some immigrants that are coming from like Ireland and Italy and something like that. They will say, oh yeah, I got stuck on Ellis Island. My grandparents got stuck on Ellis Island and whatnot and stuff like that. And that's all good and great to hear that story, that yes, it wasn't that easy for you, but it seems like you're allowed to come over here, or especially nowadays, the process for you is easier. Keyword seems like it's easier for you to come here. No one gives you that hard time trouble like they give immigrants of color. And you keep talking about illegal immigrants and secure the borders, but we're only talking about securing the borders when it comes to Mexican, Latino immigrants and immigrants who are of color that look black like you and me. Like, that's the problem I have. Now she's talking about, illegal immigration is going to be taking away jobs. Also, Candace Owens is not an ADO's black person. I believe, from what Tree of Logic stated, you can fact check her on this. She says that Candace Owens' grandfather or great-grandfather was an immigrant from the Caribbean. So Candace Owens is not an ADO's black person. This person has an immigrant background. This person has a non-ADO's affiliated background, okay? This woman can't relate. And in terms of her not being able to relate to the poverty struggle, at least, of Black people, or the ADOS struggle of Black people, look, I may not understand fully. Some people say I can't empathize because I'm not ADOS, but I will at least sympathize and say, especially when I hear, immigrants, say, oh, how can we come over here and when we make it and you didn't? Well, I have to explain. Well, there are certain obstacles in the way, but I digress. But Candace Owens is not an ADOS Black person. She also, from what I heard, grew up in a upper middle class white neighborhood. She went to school with white people. She never really hung around Black people. She basically had all of her lovers were white people. And look, I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with that. I'm just saying you can see it in the way she acts, that she doesn't often relate to Black people, or she can't often relate to ADOS Black people. And I'm not saying, like I said, I'm not saying you can't grow up privileged and, you can't grow up class privileged, at least, and that you can't grow up in a certain neighborhood in a certain life and be able to relate to Black people, because we're not monolithic. Like Tamika Mallory said, we are not monolithic. But I do agree that in Candace Owens' case, that, she is very irrelevant to kind of the Black plight, but she kind of talks as if she, is. Don't take me out of context with that. Now, playing devil's advocate with the illegal immigration or the immigration thing, I really feel like even though Black people or people may agree with her on this area, I also think that this goes to show Black people's unchecked and unrealized xenophobia. Because like Killer Mike said, there are immigrants that look like you and me, Candace. There are immigrants that look like Black people. They are Black immigrants, and some are having a hard time to get in, okay? There are Black people that are immigrants too. Let's just not make the face of immigration or the only immigrants, Mexicans or all Latinos, okay? And this is no shade to Latinos at all. I'm just saying that there are more than one type of immigrant that wants to get into this country. And for the most part, they want to get into legally. Now, playing devil's advocate, she talked about how the illegals are taking their jobs or going to take jobs because we're going to be pushed out of the job market. But one, this kind of is the same white conservative talking point that has been preached to white people for the longest time, or white rural conservative people for the longest time. Illegal immigrants and Mexicans, they are coming to take your jobs. But 9 times out of 10, these people are going to be taking jobs that you wouldn't even do, that you don't even want, that they will be willing to get paid pennies on the dollar, that you are going to be demanding more money for, that companies can't or won't pay you. And you guys have a little bit or too much pride for that, then you're talking in the same way, or now she's convincing you in the same way that white conservative people are going to say to their white conservative audience, but because she's Black, these white conservatives can use her to speak to Black people. And again, playing devil's advocate, I also have the question. I thought that we were in this process and we were in this new age and era where Black people should be starting their own businesses. I thought we were in the point where we should be starting our own businesses and, creating jobs and creating our own businesses, supporting our own businesses, so we don't have to work for other people. Now, granted, I am not saying there is a problem with having a job. I need a job. I want a job for now, okay? But I thought Black people at this point should be putting more emphasis. By judging by the mush mouths on the internet, we always need to be starting our own businesses. So you're talking about illegals taking your jobs, but then again, I thought we were supposed to be creating our own jobs. I thought all Black people shouldn't be focused on working for somebody else. I thought we were supposed to become more independent like this, okay? So we won't have to work for a job that 9 times out of 10, according to people like Boyce Watkins, is going to be racist and not care about us and pay us less, and we just need to start our own businesses and pay ourselves. So why, if that's the case, why are we worried about illegals taking jobs that, like I said, we probably don't even want or would never want to do? So again, this is why I say I'm not necessarily taking what she says too seriously, even if it's factual. Yes, there is a possibility that we could be pushed out of the job market. And let's just be honest, when it comes to like trades and stuff, because that some of those jobs, because my father works in a trade, some of those jobs are actually, they're going to be doing labor jobs. How many of us will do labor jobs? Or how many of us have goals to do a labor job? Also, let's say we do start our own businesses. You don't think you can hire them? Think about that. Companies do that all the time. You don't think that you can hire them? Think about that. Think about that. See, the problem I notice with is that ADOS Black people, they tend to look at an obstacle as the end all be all sometimes, and this is where ADOS Black people and white people have more in common than they think, okay? You always look at your obstacle as an obstacle, but the reason that immigrants, especially Black immigrants like Caribbeans and stuff, can come here and make it is because they can kind of look at their obstacles as opportunities. I don't see a lot of, and I'm not saying all, but I don't see a lot of Black folks, from what I see on the internet, a lot of you don't turn your obstacle into an opportunity. You just complain about it all day, okay? You complain about it. You don't want to hear it, but you do. Your actions always show otherwise. You don't like hearing people criticize you, but you do. Now, she made good points about certain things, like I said, a lot of it can be debunked with facts. Now, she talked about how the birth rate in the Black community is stagnant and, has stagnated. I don't think it is stagnated because things like abortion, because that's what conservatives like to use. Oh, abortion is stagnating your growth and your fertility rate and is stopping you, and all that stuff. What I have noticed is that more and more Black women and more women nowadays are not having children until we get our careers up and until we, get married, because now we want babies in wedlock, okay? You said the birth rate has stagnated. One of the reasons the birth rate has not stagnated for Black people for a while until now is because you've had a lot of Black men and women constantly creating children, whether they could take care of them or not. That is one of the things. Nowadays, Black people, and just women in general, I shouldn't say Black people, but I think more and more women are not only just not having children too early or until they get married or until they get their lives and careers together, because in the 90s and the early 2000s, you always heard about children having children. You always heard about teen pregnancies. You always heard about low income and poor communities of color constantly getting pregnant in high school. My mom said when she came to the States, there were so many teenage dropout rates and high school dropout rates because girls got pregnant. And statistics show that when a girl gets pregnant in high school, her chances of going to college are very slim, if not ever existent. She basically made a point. Nowadays, you don't see that. Teenagers are either being more responsible, or young people are being more responsible, or they're just simply refusing to have children until they either, get married, not have sex, but not have children until they get married or until they have their lives together. Okay, let's talk about that. So you're worried about how the birth rate is staggering, and a lot of times these conservatives like to throw in abortion, but I don't even believe that's the main factor. That's one factor, but women are just choosing not to have kids, especially when they can't take care of them. And to touch on the issue of abortion, I feel like a lot of times that people who touch on the issue of abortion on the conservative side, especially Black conservatives who say, oh, abortion and Margaret Sanger, that was used to kill you. That was used as a population control strategy, so we're not going to support Planned Parenthood. Well, okay, you get mad at us at abortion and you're against abortion, but then again, when poor women or Black women can't take care of the kids, or women need to terminate their pregnancies because it could be life-threatening to them, or for whatever reason, when Black women were having a bunch of kids and getting on welfare, if they were ever getting on welfare, you were the same conservative people shaming these Black women and shaming these women for having kids or a bunch of kids they couldn't take care of. Talking about, why would you have a baby and bring them into a bad situation? Why are you having kids you can't take care of? Why are you so reckless with your body and stuff like that? So either way, it's a catch-22 with these Black women. First, stop getting abortion because that was a population control strategy. Like I said in my last video of Black conservatives and Black liberals, that you guys never cared when we were aborting our babies, or when Black women were aborting babies as a population control strategy, until it came time to the general elections to vote for you. then you're like, oh, guess what? Democrats support Planned Parenthood and that was used to kill you. But you didn't care. In fact, even if we didn't abort those babies, if we had a bunch of kids or had kids you couldn't take care of, you guys were shaming us for having kids we couldn't take care of. So I really don't understand it, especially since the government, your government money is going to help pay for welfare if Black women were to get on it. So please miss me with that. This is why people boo Candace Owens, even though she's actual and factual. So Candace Owens also talks about the illiteracy rates and how no politician is talking about it or a single candidate is talking about it. And I do think we need to work on our illiteracy problem, okay? The Bronx has the lowest math and reading score, and that is problematic because you always see like, yeah, poor, low income, especially poor, low income public schools in these areas, they, don't have the best of the best math and reading scores. They have a real problem with, testing and whatnot. And, some of it has to do with funding. And another thing has to do with, the involvement of not only parents, teachers, and students as well. So I have to say, like I said, it's a three-way street in here because, one person needs to be involved just as much, if not more, than the other person and the other parties. But I also have to say, what policies are Republicans putting in place that are going to help with this so-called problem? Candace Owens says she's not Republican. No, she has said countless times she's a Republican and that she is conservative. Now, granted, there is a difference between being a conservative and a Republican, and there's a difference between being a liberal and a Democrat. But let's just be real. Far more people who claim to be conservative fall under the Republican umbrella because a majority of Republicans are conservative and the majority of Democrats are liberal. So they all vote where, or they all side with the party that they feel like caters to their beliefs overwhelmingly. So honestly, by you saying you are a conservative Black person, you automatically fall under the Republican umbrella by default, even if you don't claim that party. Now, Candace wants to say that there are single mother households and that a lack of a father in the household is the biggest problem facing Black America and the Black family. Now, I will say this, that a two-parent household, I grew up in a two-parent household, so I think there are benefits and it's good to have two parents in the household, okay? And we need to get out of this 74% or 70% out of wedlock rate of having kids out of wedlock rate in, the Black community. We need to stop that, and there needs to be a two-parent household. But she basically wants to say that it's the Democrats causing Black parents or Black fathers to not be in the home. Okay, now I do think that welfare is a factor in that, and I do think that, yes, there is like a clause or there is a thing where if you do not have the father or if you are a single parent household, you can get more money off the welfare system because they think that, when you have two parents in the household, that's two income, so you don't need that money. You don't need extra money. And you do have women who will grind off the system and say that let the father not be in the house, whether he's in the child's life or not, but let the father not be in the house so they can get more money. We get it. There are some women who cheat the system, but let's be real. White people are on welfare more than Black people in this country, and that could be attributed to the fact that there are more of them in this country than us. But I do think that it's not just welfare that is the only problem plaguing the Black family or plaguing, absentee fathers in single parent households. What about mass incarceration? What about murder, whether it be Black on Black crime or police brutality? What about all these Black men and women having 1738 children by multiple different people that they can't take care of? Some of it is individual irresponsibility as well. So she's saying that it's just Democrats. A lot of the points she says, although are, like I said, actual and factual, she's really spewing these points just to demonize the Democratic Party. That's just what it is. There are more factors that contribute to an absentee father and single mother household in the Black community. Welfare isn't the only one. And let's talk about welfare for a minute, because I noticed that some of these Black conservatives like to say, oh, welfare is ruining the Black community. I don't necessarily believe it's welfare itself, because let's just be real. Programs like WIC, or the idea of WIC, started from people like the Black Panthers when they were creating breakfast programs for single mothers or parents or families that needed them. I do agree that there are people who need to be on welfare because they have to get by, because especially in cities like New York, cost of living is high, and you have parents who actually, you have people who actually need them, okay, to get by, okay. I do agree, however, that there is a dependence that some people have on it. I think it's the dependence and the sole reliance on it that as a source of income, or only source of income, and that this is your lifeline, is what is destroying the Black community. Do not depend on it. Do not rely on it. Do not live off of it. I believe that the sole reliance on it is a problem in the Black community. However, there are people like Tish James, who is now the Attorney General. She was at one point on public assistance, okay? She probably needed it. I say, if you are on public assistance, use it to get by so you can get ahead, or figure out a way so you can get ahead so you can eventually get off of it, okay? There are people, I've read books, because I'm not sure if Candace Owens reads this book. There was a book called The Success Secrets of Black Millionaires, or 7 Success Secrets of Black Millionaires. And in one of the stories I read about, there are a few women I read about who were on welfare with their 2 or 3 kids until they started their businesses, and they're now millionaires. And let's just be honest, welfare initially was started to mainly help poor white families, okay? Now, I kind of found it very funny and a little hypocritical, because, you know, people were booing Candace when she said factual things, but when T.I. or Mike or Killer Mike said the exact same thing, or said something that they agreed with, they cheered and cheered and cheered. And, you know, they were basically cheering T.I. when he was cutting her off. And, you know, she basically said she's made public enemy number 1. And I don't think that she's made public enemy number 1 because she's telling the truth that Black people don't want to hear. Some of the things, like Killer Mike said, what Candace Owens said, Louis Farrakhan has said for the last 25 years. But the thing is, Candace Owens, she is telling us get off the Democratic plantation and go to the Republican plantation. That is what she is saying. Killer Mike made a good point, which I'm going to get into later. Okay? The reason people don't trust you, or the reason people don't like Candace Owens, or Black people don't like Candace Owens, is because you're not telling us get off the Democratic plantation and be independent and start our own party. You're telling us get off the Democratic plantation and go to the Republican plantation, when we already know overwhelmingly, for the most part, that the Republicans don't do anything for us. So you're basically telling us to go deal with a different problem in a different way. No, to go deal with the same problem, I should say, in a different way. That's what you're telling us to do. So this is why people boo you and jeer you and everything like that, because it's not about what you said, it's about why you're saying it. You're trying to wake Black people up. I think for the most part, Black people, we already know that for the most part that the Democrats really don't care, or the Democrats haven't put in any Black agendas, which, and in a way, we dropped the ball on. Let's just be honest. Black people have dropped the ball on getting their agendas shown. All we do is talk about an agenda on the internet, but have you really presented any agenda, especially to your local politics? But the thing is, Candace, I think if Candace was an independent and she was not siding with either party, or she at least was a Democrat and criticizing the Democrats, okay? If Candace Owens was more of an independent and said, here's how we made the Democratic Party better, or the liberal side better, or here is how we just become independent altogether. If she was doing that and told us to get off the Democratic plantation and be free, I think more people will find her favorable, okay? Maybe. I can never say never. But because she's trying to tell us to get off of one plantation and go on the other plantation, this is why people don't like her. We already know that other plantation is not going to work for us, but you trying to convince us that that side is particularly better when it's been particularly worse is not going to make people want to listen to you. Because like T.I. said, you started with some bullshit. That's how Black people feel about her. She says that Trump has denounced racism, but I feel like he's only doing it when he feels forced to or when he wants to look good in a certain light. And maybe even if he's trying, he's not doing such a good job at it. Let's just say that. So this is where I have to kind of agree with Candace Owens, and not agree with her, but I agreed with a lot of people that said this, especially Black independents, okay? This is not just Candace Owens. Democrats really do get our votes, or easily get our votes, especially in the general election, when they scream buzzwords like racism and racism white supremacy. They always use the racism white supremacy buzzwords and arguments and talking points that get us riled up. And what happened to common sense is right. And even the people on the internet are right when they talk about the people like Umar Johnson and the Brother Polites of the world. Race and racism is a hustle. Okay, we see that with Shaun King. Chrissy pointed this out too. There is more money or more attention to be made when you talk about racism, white supremacy, and politics and everything that surrounds it. You get a lot of more attention from Black people because Black people, like Candace said, are emotionally responsive and emotionally reactive to things like racism and racism, white supremacy. I even said it. Why is it when I'm talking about Umar Johnson, whether in a positive or negative light, is I can get so many views on that, but when I'm doing makeup tutorials or when I'm, singing and when I'm, doing other stuff, I can't, get that same amount of viewership. I get so many views on this thing, but I can't get views on just doing something regular, schmegular, and just as important and beneficial to us. Like, come on now. We deserve to live our lives outside of racism, white supremacy, the racism, white supremacy argument. You know what I'm saying? We can talk about it when it's time to. I don't ever think we should stop talking about it, but I feel like some of the people who let it be talked about or who think about it 24/7, I once at one point did, who let this conversation be their whole life or let this whole thing be their whole life. And I get it. It exists around us. We get it. We're not denying it. But I feel like some of us who let it be our whole life and then shame other people who don't let it be their whole life, even if they still want to talk about it and even if they still acknowledge it and will talk about it. And they don't have to be conservative. They could be just as liberal or moderate or independent and talk about it, but because they don't make it 24/7 their life, then it's a problem to these so-called mushmouth Umarian pro-blacks conscious community people. Now, she basically says the Democrats easily get the Black vote by using racism and white supremacy talking points and rhetoric in terms of, telling us, oh, the other side is racist and, you got to be scared about racism, basically using the fear or your fear of racism, white supremacy to get your vote. But I have to call her out. This is why people don't take her seriously. It's not because Black people in the crowd who booed her when she said that or who don't like her when she said that don't know that what she's saying is right. She's saying that the Democrats are doing is no different than what Trump is doing when it comes to his white crowd or his rural white crowd, when he says, guess what? The illegal immigrants are going to take your jobs. Their fear, he's playing on their fear of what's going to be or potentially going to be taken away from them. See, this is what I noticed. Democrats use fear-mongering tactics on people who fear that things won't be given to them or things that are progressive or seemingly progressive won't be given to them if the other party gets in. But Republicans and conservatives use fear-mongering tactics of things that may be taken away from them if the other party gets in. So these two parties are pandering and using fear-mongering tactics on both sides. And this is why people don't like Candace Owens. You're not telling us this to wake us up and to be free. You're telling us this to go on to another plantation. So this is why people don't take her seriously. And the cutting off and the back and forth between T.I. and Candace Owens really goes to show what's the problem on the far right and the far left, okay? What Candace Owens shows me about the far right is that they are very intellectually dishonest when it comes to certain things, okay? But what T.I. shows me about the far left is that they're very emotional and illogical because judgment flies out the window. And it seems like a lot of people like to cheer T.I. and Killer Mike, especially when they felt like they were attacking Candace Owens. So I feel like a lot of it from the far left is a lot of emotion and a lack of strategy and critical thinking because we let our emotion get the best of us. And that's the reason that was one of the reasons I said I have backed out of this so-called pro-Black movement. because it was full of emotional people. And sometimes offering logic where they don't agree with gets them upset and gets you called all types of agents and traitors, okay? And you don't even have to be on the Candace Owens route and vote for Trump. No, you just have to say, I don't agree with this. Now, I actually want to get to my favorite person of the panel, and that is Killer Mike. The only person I felt dropping knowledge, moderate critical thinking knowledge, and true actual factual stuff outside of Candace Owens was Killer Mike. That was the only great person on that panel, in my opinion. He kept it real, he was moderate, and he, just basically spewed out facts. But he also can debunk Candace's facts with other facts, okay? Now, he said, never allow your history to be wiped away. And I agree. Don't dwell on the past or the problems of the past. You know what I'm saying? Don't dwell on it like, people like the mushmouths on the far left. But do not ignore it like the intellectually dishonest people on the far right. That's what I'm saying. This is what I love about being moderate. I've called myself moderate. Like I said, socially liberal, but I called myself moderate because I care, but I'm not going to care so much that I can't think critically. And a lot of us are lacking critical thinking on the far right. That is the problem. Also said we need to pass down voter knowledge to children and young people, which is true. He said we need to pay attention to our local politics, which is true, because he said he's actually working with local politicians to get stuff done. Write down your agendas and hand it to local politicians. We're not doing that. But we're worried about who's going to be in charge every 4 years and how that's going to affect us. The best point I saw he made, or one of the best points I saw that Killer Mike made, was when he said, hey, do you guys see this here? When Katrina, T.I., and Candace were going at it, he said, you are looking at 3 people arguing over who has the best master. And that is so true. Yes, Killer Mike, you are right. They're arguing about which plantation is better. I thought we were supposed to be free of all plantations. Now, he made a very great point. He said when it comes to people with a difference of opinion, we can all have a difference of opinion. We can all have different beliefs, whether it be liberal, conservative, independent, moderate. We can all have that, but let's come together, especially behind closed doors, write down our points and, come to a good compromise on them. Now, he mentioned something about the Waffle House and how, okay, that time with the Waffle House, we were talking about boycotting all the Waffle Houses. Now, he's down south and he lives in Atlanta. I live in New York, so I can't speak on what goes down south. We have IHOPs in New York, okay? Up north, we have IHOPs. Down south, you have Waffle House, okay? But he basically says, okay, when you boycott the whole Waffle House, you take away jobs that will possibly be for Black people. So, and let's just be honest, when you boycott all Waffle Houses, what about some of the Black people who may want to get in and franchise them? So there is a level of opportunities. It's the same thing Lovely T said about Netflix and how Monique wanted everyone to boycott Netflix. And he's saying, hey, Netflix has given opportunities and platforms to Black and women and LGBTQ and marginalized and small indie time filmmakers. And yes, I remember when Netflix was just that thing that killed Blockbuster, okay? If you're old like me, you know Blockbuster, okay? I used to live near one, okay? She's right. There are certain opportunities we are taking away from people because we want to destroy a whole empire because of one thing. And I agree that boycotting that one Waffle House or shutting down the one Waffle House does show that you mess with us, we're going to mess with you. And they could get the hint by shutting down the one Waffle House. Now, like Killer Mike said, he's not defending the whole Waffle House chain because he loves Waffle House. He's just saying it because he realizes there is a bigger picture here, because you put certain Black people, or potentially put certain Black people, out of work. And then again, here we go. We're going to come back to the whole, there are no jobs for Black people. But I will say this, just like Netflix, like Lovely T said, Monique was pissed off she didn't get her deal. So she wants all Netflix to be boycotted by Black people and probably people in general. You know what I'm saying? And basically say that, because she didn't get that we should shut down Netflix or boycott Netflix, or at least boycott until they get it right and give her what she wants, okay? Or get it right for all Black and women entertainers and, you know, content creators and stuff. But Netflix has done that. I feel like I look back on When They See Us and like Homecoming, and I feel like if we had really overwhelmingly listened to Monique, we probably wouldn't take When They See Us to where it is right now. It was the most streamed thing on Netflix, especially when it came out. It was most streamed 23 million accounts, and I think people are still watching and rewatching it again. And I'm counting down my days until the Emmys, and I wanted to win most, if not all, of those Emmys, okay? I swear, the people I want to win, I hope they win, okay? But anyways, I'm saying that's true. We could have put a lot of people out of work at Netflix, like Dear White People. She's Gotta Have It, okay? Even though that got canceled after 2 seasons, and Luke Cage, even though that got canceled after 2 seasons, but still, there are a lot of people. When They See Us gets nominated for 16 Emmys, okay? And people like Netflix are changing the game. Killer Mike is right. You know, we can't put a whole other people out of business, or a whole other people that are important to us out of business because we're pissed off at one company. Killer Mike also made a good point about how we need to ratify the 13th Amendment, and Tamika made a good point about how we should ratify the 5th Amendment. And, you know, there are certain amendments and policies and laws that need to get ratified and fixed. So we also need to put in an agenda where that changes or puts in new laws that work in our favor. So yes, I do agree with him. And this is why Killer Mike was pretty much the only one that I could agree with through and through without having to come back and say, well, what about this? What about that? What about... No. I could listen to Killer Mike and say, you are absolutely right. And this is honestly, look, I don't approve of him cursing constantly. I don't approve of him constantly dropping the N-word, even if it's N-E-G-U-S. But because of our culture, I don't approve of using the word N-I-G-G-A-S or N-I-G-G-E-R. I don't approve of any of it. I think we need to expunge it and, you know, completely get rid of it in our vocabulary, and we need to enhance our vocabulary better. But I can at least say, this is where I can say that, you know what, the message is more important than the messenger, especially because Killer Mike has been a lot more consistent in his messaging and his messages. So I can actually say that, you know, Killer Mike is definitely not the worst. If not, he was the best one on this panel. Now, I have to get into a little bit about the crowd. Now, the crowd was just a complete mess, okay? I look at the crowd and I'm saying, this is really what is wrong with Black people. This is why a lot of us feel like we can't keep it classy. We get very heated. We are very emotional people, and we are easily triggered. And I feel like this is the cause for a lot of so-called boycotts. We are very much easily triggered, and people tend to use that, whether they're trolling us on the internet or whether they're using, you know, the so-called Black outrage as the new marketing tool. We are very much easily triggered people, and this is why people think they can get us. And to be honest, I feel like we have let it work for so long. So no, you know what? I think that the crowd really showed a problem with, like I said, like T.I. did, with people on the far left. And let's just be honest, some Black people will probably claim liberal only when as it pertains to racism. Let's just be honest. They think they're liberal because, let's just be real, when you hear people call themselves conservative, especially Black, that all they need is that to say, we don't like you. And I believe that one of the reasons the crowd booed Candace Owens was because they have a fear of being converted, because they know what she's saying about the Democrats isn't necessarily false. You know, they believe it's mostly true, but at the same time, I feel like their fear is of that they will be converted or corrupted and then turned onto the Republican side, and they don't want to, you know, be the quote-unquote sellouts and coons and bedwenches of the world. They don't want that. So it's best to just boo you. But let's just be honest, like I said before, they know that she is not, you know, beneficial, or, you know, going to the Republican side is beneficial. So her trying to convince them is bad. There was even a guy who I heard was just trying to get to T.I. to promote his music. And I'm saying this is the worst time for it. Now, granted, I can't blame the guy necessarily. Take all opportunities as you can, but I feel like that was a very inappropriate time to talk about your album or how you want to get your music out there when there is more bigger fish to fry right here what we're doing. So I understand it. But honestly, the crowd was a mess, and Diddy was doing the most. And Diddy is narcissistic sometimes, but you know what? Whatever. He was doing the most. But I honestly think that this whole summit wasn't a complete waste of time, but because of that one clip that went viral, it made it look like a waste of time, and how Black people really can't just, you know, have a difference of opinion without being shunned out. But like I said, Candace Owens, you're trying to convert us. You're not trying to save us. I'm sorry. But anyway, that is all I have to say about this. I'm sorry this video is so long, but like I said, I tried to go as deep as possible, okay? So hopefully you guys could stay to the end of the video. Comment what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to check out the links down below. Don't forget to check out all my other videos and like those as well. Thank you so much again for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.